Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at how to design Matrixboard circuit layouts using DIY Layout Creator. So, in this video we're going to learn how to convert circuit diagrams that look like this into nice, clear, easy to follow Matrixboard layouts like this one. Matrixboard allows us to make simple one-off circuits without having to use a PCB. It's relatively inexpensive and pretty easy to use, so it's great for small circuits that are not too complex. In these images you can see an example of a circuit built using Matrixboard. This is the top view here on the left-hand side, where we can see the components that have been placed on the board. On the right-hand side is the underneath view, where you can see where the components have been soldered together. In this view we have a slightly more zoomed in view of the board, and you can see we have a number of components. We have a variable resistor here on the left, a toggle switch, an integrated circuit socket, a few resistors, a couple of transistors, an LED, and that's about it. And what we've done is we've placed a piece of stripped hookup wire through some of the holes on the top of the board and also through some of the holes on the bottom of the board. And these act as the power and ground rails essentially for connecting the other components on the board too. If we look more closely at the underside of the board, you can see here's the rail again on the top for power, and here's the rail on the bottom for ground. And you can see where the components have been soldered to connect them to the power and ground rails, and then also to each other. So you can see there's a resistor here, and then it's connected to the LED, and then the LED is connected to the collector of a transistor, and then the emitter of the transistor is going down here to ground. In this particular circuit, we used the IC socket just as a holder for placing a capacitor into the circuit. We wanted to be able to change the value of the capacitor to try out different things with the circuit. So we just use an IC socket there to allow us to plug it in really easily. So all the components are generally connected underneath the board. And it just makes it nice and neat to look at. Again, here we have the top view of the board, and you can see the components, but you don't actually see where the connections are. So what we're going to be doing with DIY Layout Creator is essentially doing the same as this. We're going to have a view of what the board would look like from the top. Okay, so to download DIY Layout Creator, just type in DIYLC into Google, and then the first link you'll see at the top of the page, just click that. That will bring you to the DIY Fever page. It's quite a good website here, but we want to download the application. So if we click here on the download page link, that will bring us here to where the actual file you need is provided. So in this case we're looking at DIY Layout Creator version 4.9.0. So what we're interested in for this particular example is the Windows edition of the software, but if you're using a Mac, there's also the OS X version there as well. Okay, so for my purposes I'm going to download this one, so I'm going to click this link here. Now, I've actually downloaded it twice here, but that's fine. Now, you'll notice that the browser will show you that this file could be dangerous, but it's actually okay. So I'm just going to select Keep here. Okay, and it says this app might harm your device, but it's fine. It's just that Windows Defender doesn't really know what the program is because it's not that well known. So I'm just going to click Show More and then select Keep Anyway. Okay, and then it shows the file here. I've already downloaded it before, so it just comes up with a 2 after the name here. But if we click this, it will allow us to run it. Now again, Windows is saying, it's protected your PC. But if you select More Info here, and then select Run Anyway, you'll get a little warning just to tell you that, this program is trying to install. But that's fine. You can click Yes. And then it asks you where you'd like to install it. So program files is fine, so I'm going to click Next. And then the shortcut DIY Layout Creator, yeah, that's fine, so I'm going to click Next there too. And then Install. Once that's done, you can leave the tick box there and you can click Finish, and the program will start up. Okay, here we have a nice blue desktop area. Now, if you don't like blue, there are a number of ways you can change the layout. So if you go to Config and then select Theme, you can choose Dark, if you like, which is a black background, or you can choose Light, which is a white background. For this particular example, I'm just going to use the blue background because I think it looks kind of nice. Now, there are also a couple of other options under Config that you might want to look at. First, anti-aliasing. This just makes everything look a little bit nicer. You may or may not want to use that depending on how powerful your graphics card is. Also, another one here is high quality rendering. Again, if you're having issues, you can always turn this off. Also, hardware acceleration. Usually I have that turned on, but I'm using my second monitor, and sometimes when I'm using my second monitor that can cause problems, so I've turned it off here. Mouse wheel zoom is useful. That just allows you to zoom in and out of the drawing using your mouse wheel. And also show grid is nice because it allows us to see the squares here. But you know, you can turn it off if you prefer. So whenever you're starting a new project, one of the first things you do is go to Edit and then select Edit Project Settings. So in this case, we're going to do a circuit called the rain detector. So I'm just going to put that in here. And then just delete that bit. And then whoever the author is, you can put in your name there. I've just put in TekSparkz. Okay, now the grid spacing is set to 0.1 of an inch. That's fine. And everything here is pretty much okay. So I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to click OK. So now this is our drawing area. And over on the left-hand side here, we have a whole load of different objects that can be brought into your drawing. So let's just have a look at a few of these. First, to have boards, different types of boards that you can work with. We have connectivity, so different types of connectors. We have electromechanical. So there's lots of different objects here, like connectors for batteries. We have switches, toggle switches, jacks. There's some that are specific to guitar because this is initially designed for use, particularly with guitar electronics. We have miscellaneous, where we can do things like putting in labels and text and images that we can insert into the diagram. We have passive components then, so things like capacitors, resistors, inductors. Then we have surface mount devices. There's a couple of those, surface mount resistors and capacitors. There's also schematic symbols, but we're not really going to use this for what we want, so I'm going to close that again. We have semiconductors. So things like diodes, integrated circuits, LEDs, transistors. Then we also have the option to be able to just draw basic shapes, and this can come in useful sometimes. And then we also have tubes, so that's for thermionic valves. We won't be using those in this particular example. Okay, so the circuit that we want to draw today actually is based on this circuit diagram here. So what we have here is a 9-volt battery supplying power to the circuit. Over here we have a sensor, and that's actually made using a piece of strip board. And then we have a resistor, an LED, a BC108 transistor, another 2K resistor here, and a variable resistor. So we have a plus 9 volts line along the top, and then we have a 0 volts line essentially running along the bottom. So what we want to do is redraw this out using Matrixboard so that we can have an idea how our circuit is going to look when we're building it. Now, in order to make it a little easier for me to draw the circuit and show you at the same time, I've put the two items on one screen. So what we're going to do first then is select our board. And unfortunately, as far as I can see, there doesn't seem to be specifically a Matrixboard design in DIY Layout Creator. Now, I could be wrong, but what we can do is we can use a perfboard. So with perfboard, it is basically a board with loads of holes drilled in it, and then it has little copper pads on it. Now Matrixboard doesn't have the copper pads, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color of the board so that it looks just like Matrixboard. So if we right click on the board itself and then go edit selection, and then we choose the color, this main color here, we can click here, and then I'm going to pick a dark brown color, something like this. Click OK. And then also on the pad color, I'm going to make it the same color as the board, which is this one. Click OK. And then if we click OK now, you can see we have a board that looks very similar to Matrixboard. Now it also has numbers across the top, which is useful for us to look at specific columns, and then we have letters along the side, so we can look at these as rows. Okay, so the first component I'm going to put into the board is going to be battery. So to do that, we need to go to electromechanical, and here we can find the 9-volt battery clip. So if I click it and then just move my mouse, it shows me a battery clip. So that's perfect. I'll just click it there. Now we want to connect it to the board. So to do that, we're going to need to draw wires. Now just before I do that, I'm going to use a trick here to save this type of board so I can use it again in the future. And to do that, I can right click the board, and then I can go save as variant, and I can type in a variant name. And normally I would put in Matrixboard here like this, but I've actually already done it, so I don't need to do that, but you might find it useful to do that. So that means the next time you want to bring out a board, say I bring out perfboard again, I can right click it and I can go apply variant, and it converts it to Matrixboard. So I'm just deleting that. By the way, to delete something, just click it and then press the delete key. Okay, so I'm just going to bring in the battery snap again, bring it there. So what I want to do is connect power and ground wires. So to do that, I'm just going to go to connectivity, which is here, and then select hookup wire. So when you bring a hookup wire, whenever you move it around the board, you can see that it highlights all the little holes. So I'm just going to click here on the top, and then with the wire itself, you can bend it into different positions by pulling on these points. So I'm just going to click on this point, and I'm going to bring it up here, and then I'm going to click on this point and bring it this way. And now the wire is kind of looped around. And then I'm going to get another wire by clicking again on hookup wire. And then I'm going to click on the bottom here, because this is going to be our ground along here. So again, click the end of the wire and bring it up to the battery snap point. And then you can modify the shape of the wire by moving the points. So when you're happy with the look, you can then just change the color of the wire, because it's giving us a green wire, but really you should have red for the power. So I just go click on it and select edit selection. Click here, pick a nice red color. That's okay. And then click this one. Right click, select edit selection, pick a color black, and then it's black. Okay, and if I move this, we can adjust it slightly if we want. You may prefer to have them coming out a bit like this. Okay, so there we have the power connected to the board. Just have to move that again. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is put our rail across the top, which is just essentially a piece of stripped wire, but it allows us to connect devices to the power and ground lines. So to do that, we can choose jumper. And what a jumper does is it just allows us to draw a line however far we want from one point to another. Like that. However, I'm just going to shorten this a little bit, so I'm going to click it again, and then I can drag the point back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect 2 across the top, then the piece of wire will be threaded underneath the board for 3, and then back for another 2. So we don't see the bit that's threaded underneath the board, so I'm just going to draw it like this. So 1, 2, 3, and then across here for 2. Click it again, 1, 2, 3, and across for 2. Click it again, 1, 2, 3, and across for 2. You don't have to do it exactly like this. I just found that for this particular board it works relatively well. Okay, so that's the top part done. However, I don't really like it being blue because that makes it look like as if the wire still has insulation on it, and I want it to look like it's been stripped. So I can click on each wire and then right click, edit selection, and then here I can choose the color. So I choose this light gray here to make it look kind of silvery like metal. And I do this for each one of them. So again, click silver, okay. This one here, edit selection, silver, click OK. And then what's good, the good news is, because this little bit is a bit tedious, but we can copy this and apply it to the bottom of the board as well, once we have it done. So again, edit, click the color, click gray, click OK, and just one more. There we go. Okay, so now that I have those, if you click on one of them and then hold Control, the Control key on your keyboard, just keep clicking while still holding down Control. Now all of those are selected. I can go to Edit and I can select Copy. And now if I just click away from those and then go Edit and click Paste, I'll get a second set of them, and you can just see them moving there. So I'm going to apply these down here. And now they're done as well. So now we have our power along the top, and we also have our ground along the bottom. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is start placing some of our components. So if we look here at the circuit, we have our 9-volt battery connection coming along the top here. And that's the same as this battery snap-in, and then the power rail along the top. So the first thing that we see connected to that is a 220 ohm resistor. So what we do is we scroll down here and we go to passive. And here we can see resistors. Okay, so there's quite a few variants here, but let's just take resistor and then we move over to here. Now I'm going to place the resistor about here because I want to be connecting the wire from the resistor to the piece of wire that's running underneath the board. So I'm going to click here and then I'm going to run it down to about here. Now it says R1 at the moment, but we can edit that. So let's have a look. Go to Edit Selection, and then we can put in a value, so 220 ohms. So we have to select from the drop-down box and we can pick ohms. We can also pick a power rating if we want, so there's a few different ones there. We can pick watts, and if we pick 0.25, that's 1/4 of a watt, and we can click OK. And now it shows the color codes for that resistor there. Now if we want to make it look a little bit different again, we can choose different variants. So there's some variants in here, and you can see here we have 1/4 watt carbon film, metal film. So there's a few different variations we can choose, like this. Okay, so lots of different types. Just depends on which one you like. Or it also depends on which one you're going to be using in your circuit as well. Carbon film is fairly popular. You may find though that if you set it like that, the value may be gone. So you may need to re-enter that in. Okay, and it's put in the values there. So that's our resistor. The next thing we want to put in is the LED. So we need to go down to semiconductors and LED. So we just click on our LED, and what we want to do is connect it into the board like that. Okay, so what that does is it shows that our LED is here. We can't see the pins, but we can assume that they're connected this way. If you prefer, you can delete it, and you can make the pins of the resistor a little bit shorter instead. And what you can do then is get your LED again. And then click here, but maybe bring it a little bit apart like that. So it might be a little bit more obvious that there are pins going into the board. The next component we need to get then is our transistor. So again, under semiconductors, you'll find the transistor, and the TO92 version is the one that we're going to be using. So we click here, and then we want to put this into our board. But the problem is, the way it's spaced at the moment, it's not showing the pins going into each of those holes properly. So I'm just going to place it for a moment, and then I'm going to right click it and go edit selection, and then the pin spacing, I'm going to change that to 0.1 of an inch and click OK. And now the pins match up with the holes in the board. Okay, so that's that component in. Now it's a little hard to read the text, so I'm going to right click it, and then I'm going to go edit selection, and then the color of the label, I'm just going to change that to white and click OK. And now it comes out in white. So the next thing I want to do is show where the wires are going from this. So we can just do little pieces of wire using the connectivity option. Go to jumper, and you can draw one in there, and we can draw one here, and then just change their colors. Alright, clicked on the wrong one there, click on the wire. Now you don't have to draw on a piece of wire here if you don't want to. If you prefer, what you can do is you can delete that, and then you can just extend the LED down to meet it. So whichever you prefer. Okay, so that shows we have a resistor here, connects into the positive side of the LED, then into the collector of the transistor, and then ultimately out through the emitter. So the next component we want to put in then is this resistor here, which is connected to the base of the transistor. So to do that, we get another resistor, so we go to passive and we choose resistor, and this time we're going to place it about here, and we need to put in the value. So we edit, actually first, yeah, we can leave it like that, so we can edit and we can put in the power rating as 1/4 watt, and then we can put in the value, so it's 2 kilo ohms. Now you can also change your shape here if you want. You can put in tubular if you prefer. That makes it look like this. You may prefer it looking like that, but I think we'll just leave it standard for the moment. Okay, so that's our resistor now put into the circuit. Now the resistor at the moment isn't connected in the right place because we need to drag it down a little bit here Now it's kind of implied that it's connecting to the base, which is the middle pin of the transistor. So it's important to make sure you get that right. So we have a couple more components that we need to connect in now. One of them is the variable resistor, and the other one is the board that we use to make our sensor. So what we need to do to put in a variable resistor is choose potentiometer. And there's a big size and a small size. The big one is fairly big, so if we right click it and choose variant, we can choose a slightly smaller version. Now it's not aligned the right way, so we need to rotate it. So we can transform selection and we can rotate counterclockwise. And that just makes it a little easier to connect into our circuit. So if we have a look over here, we can see that one of the wires from the variable resistor is connected to ground. So we'll get some hookup wire again, and we can connect it here, and then we can bring it and connect it to this point. And again, you can tidy these up whichever way you like. Okay, and then we need to connect this end of the variable resistor to this point here. It connects on to the end of this resistor. So I'm going to get some hookup wire again, connect it here, and connect it here, and then just bring these around a little bit. Now what we need to do is show that this wire is actually connected to this. So if we go to jumper and click here and click here, and then we can leave the insulation on the wires if we want to. It just depends on your personal preference. It can be a little harder to do that when you're making it, so sometimes it's just easier to strip the wire. So in this case I'm going to click it and edit and change the color again. Click OK. So now we can see this piece of wire goes here. Underneath the board, the end of this resistor and that piece of wire will be twisted together and then soldered. And the end of this piece of wire and this piece of wire will also be soldered together. Now this variable resistor does have to be tied as well. So what we would usually do here is just get some more hookup wire. Put one end here, one end here, and then maybe make it a little smaller. And there we go. Okay, so that's our variable resistor in our circuit. And the last component we need is the sensor board. So to create our sensor board, what we need to do is just scroll over a little bit, and then we need to choose a different type of board. So in this case it's Vero board, also known as strip board. And we're going to use this to make a sensor which will detect the presence of moisture. So I'm going to just choose the number of rows, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'll just shrink it slightly. So we have 10 rows, and it should be long enough, about that level. Now you can zoom out with your mouse to get the size that you want. And if you decide that you need to move everything, you can just drag your mouse across the whole lot like that, and then just move, and everything will move. And then you can use your mouse wheel again. So I just want this board to be slightly bigger. So just click away from it again. Okay. So you can zoom right in to see what you're doing. So what I want to do is, if we look at this over here for a second, what we have are different strips of wire, or in this case they're copper tracks on what's known as strip board. So each one of these represents a copper track, and what we want is a sort of a grid where we have strips of copper that are beside each other but not interconnected. But what happens is, if a big drop of water lands there, it will interconnect these copper strips, because water conducts to a certain degree, and it will allow a current to flow from one of these all the way to the other one, like the way this diagram is done. So to do that, what I'm going to do is just get some hookup wire. Again, put a piece here and a piece there. It's pretty short hookup wire this time. And then the same down here. Okay, so this connects our sensor board into the circuit. But if we look at this drawing over here, we can see that this resistor and this variable resistor meet up at this point. So really what we could do here is just move this down to there. Or if we want to keep it neat, what we can do is just put another jumper from here to here. Change the color, click OK, and OK again. So these are going to be connected together. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is interconnect these copper strips. And we just want to connect the top one to the third one to the fifth one, the fifth one to the seventh one to the ninth one. So to do that, we get our jumpers again. And we connect like this. First to the third. Click away from it again. Then third to the fifth. Click away. Fifth to the seventh. And seventh to the ninth. So that connects this strip, this strip, this strip, this strip, and this strip. Now we want to do the same again, but up the way. So we're going to connect this bottom strip here to this one. And then this one up to this one. And then this one up to this one. And this one up to this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the colors of them to make it a little easier to understand which is which. So I'm going to make some of these green. Never remember which green I use. So a bit darker. I'll just change that back again. Okay, so that's close enough. So this shows that these ones are one side of the connector. Ooh, I think I did too many there, so let's just change this one back to blue. Okay, just showing the different sets that are together. So what happens in the circuit ultimately is in order for this transistor to turn on, it needs to have a current flowing through this resistor and also a voltage. And so this can only happen when a current can flow through this sensor here. And this will only happen when it's wet. So a current will flow through and go in this way. So the next thing we need to do then is to just put in a battery. Now the thing is, there aren't any batteries in this particular application, but we can make one. And I'll just show you. Here's one that I made earlier under building blocks. So that's something I made. Okay, so to be able to do that, what we can do is you can just draw some shapes. So if we get to the shapes section, just here, we can then select rectangles. So here's one rectangle, and we can just drag it to make it a little bit bigger. That's one. And then we can make another rectangle. That's two. And another rectangle. This one's going to be a lot smaller. And then we can copy that and right click and paste. And there we have our battery, but the color is not right yet. So we just click it, right click, select edit selection, select the color, and in this case black. Now this one, right click, edit selection, select the color again, and I'm just going to choose orange, and then right click this, edit selection, we'll pick that kind of silvery color again, and same with this one, edit selection, silvery color again, click OK. So now we have the item, but if we try and move bits, they're not connected together. So another thing I want to do is put a label on it so we know what kind of battery it is. So we go to miscellaneous and then label, and when you click label it drags some text out. So we double click the text to edit it, and I'm just going to put 9 volt battery. Actually, I'll just put 9V battery. And what we want to do is change the color of the text. We can leave it at black actually. Okay, we click OK, and there it is there. Okay, so the next thing we need to do to make it into one item is select the whole lot, then right click and save as building block. And we're going to call it battery 9V. Okay, and what happens then is it goes up into our building block section here. So now if I want to, I can just delete that, and I can select battery 9V from here and put it in, and it now works as a single unit. So the last thing we really want to do now is just maybe label some of our items and maybe put a title on the drawing as well. So to do that, just go to text again under miscellaneous, choose label, okay, double click, and we want to change the color of this to white. Again, it depends on the background color of your layout. You maybe, if you're using a white background, you probably want to use black. Then you can choose the size. I'm going to make it a good bit bigger for this. And then the text goes in here. So this is rain detector. And the alignment, you can choose to change the horizontal alignment if you want. So just make it left aligned and click OK. And then you can place your title there. And if you want to then say what each of the other components are, like this one here, the variable resistor, this is actually a 4K7 or 4700 ohm resistor. So we can right click that, go edit. Okay, and then we can put in a value here, 4.7K, and you can see that it's changed it there now. Now we might also want to write in what the different components are. So say for example you want to say what kind of transistor you're using. You can put a label down here, double click it, maybe change that to 20, change the color to white, click OK, and then put in something like this. Q1 equals BC 108 or alternatively maybe a KSP2222A transistor. Okay, so that's one there. And there you go. We now have our board drawn out with all our different components. And it's a nice and easy to follow layout. So when you're making your circuit, you know exactly where everything goes. The only thing that might be a little bit unclear is what things are soldered together. But if you look carefully, you can pretty much see, you know, we have a resistor connected to the top line. It's also connected to the LED. The LED then is connected to the transistor. The emitter of the transistor is connected to ground. The base of the transistor is connected to this resistor here. So it's fairly straightforward, but it gives you a really nice, neat layout that's easy to follow. Finally then, when your drawing is finished, if you want to print it out, all you have to do is go to File, and from here you can select Print. Or if you prefer, you can export it to a PDF document, or you can export it as a PNG graphic file. And then you can use that file in any other documents you want. So just to finish up, the link for DIY Layout Creator is here, and I'll also leave a copy of the link in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, maybe you might hit that like button and perhaps subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.